I'm still in Indiana, but I am an hour and a half south of where I've been. I'm at my sister's house, um, which is in a neighborhood, so it has houses on either side of it. I can't be walking around naked. Um, there are still fireflies flickering around, which is nice. Birds chittering in the trees, so she has a nice garden. Um, happy bird noises. So I have been thinking about talking about relationship, and I was going to call it something about a sugar daddy. What am I going to call it? Sugar daddy? I've been thinking about that song from the Hedwigs, from Hedwig and the Angry Inch, and there's a lot of stuff around that. But the impetus for it is one of the projects that I have in being here is not being hateful, not being triggered. Now, the trick about being triggered is that when we're triggered, we're usually pretty lost, right? When we're triggered, we're over. We're saturated, we're traumatized, we're having an attack, whatever. We don't get to make good decisions when we're triggered. But as long as the hate stays mild enough, the anger stays mild enough, it is possible to be like, oh, I don't need to be angry about that. Example, my sister was telling me about, I guess, plans for these. She's going on a trip, so that's why I'm down here at her house to watch her dogs and her plants, and have some alone time. And she was really upset about some choices about the people that she's traveling with were making. She was very upset. She thought it was, I don't know, really irritating or frustrating, or she was getting, angry. And I said, remember that right next to the reality you're living into there's a reality right next to it where it's not a problem. It doesn't have to be a problem. It's not your problem. It doesn't, it can just be something that's happening, and you just deal with it, and it's fine. It's okay. It's all right. Don't worry about it. It doesn't have to be a problem. And that can be applied to any situation. You can respond to whatever's happening and make a problem out of it. Now, when I walked across Spain a few years ago with my mother, I went into it understanding that she had that mindset a bit. But in spending a little over 2 months with her, being her primary companion, I really understood that her style, her psychology style, was making a problem out of almost every situation, especially every new situation, or what we might call a different situation. And I use that word because I've always disliked it for being so inarticulate, but it is a word that is used by people here, and certainly my family, to describe things. Oh, that's different. When I was a kid, I was often, oh, well, he's different. Oh, he's different. I've talked about that before, I'm sure. And that relates to, like, my folks are the kind of folks, not my brother and sister as much as my parents, that they go to a handful of restaurants, and when they go to each of those restaurants, there's something they like, and they get the same thing every time. Because you find something you like, and you like it, and that's all you need to know. Because something that's different, it implies an insecurity and a discomfort to have something be different. Which I've always imagined my parents to be the archetypes of the average Americans that I was running from as a child. And there are a lot of Americans that are very different than my parents, but have that version of Midwestern American thought process. Well, that's different. Oh no, well, he's different. And any different situation is potential for a problem. I guess that's it, is that if you know you like it, then it should please you every time you do it, and everything will be okay, and there won't be any dissatisfaction or discomfort or anger. Except that's, of course, not how reality works, but it is a logic that many people use. And that is, of course, not my deal. And you can't change anybody's mind from functioning the way it functions. But I think it's wonderful to remind people that making everything different a problem, or when other people make choices that you wouldn't make, making that a problem, as opposed to just being like, hey, it's their style, it's how they roll. Again, that is easier said than done, because that specific line, it's their style, is I had these, I was going to say roommates, people who lived next door to me in my apartment that I loved in Washington Heights, and they got to the point where they were screaming all the time. There was a junkie, and when she tried to get into this guy's apartment, she would often stand outside of his door, banging on his door for hours and screaming at him until he opened the door. And then once she was inside, they would start screaming at each other. And eventually he moved in one of her friends, or junkie friends, and then they just lived together, and they were often screaming at each other for hours, screaming in a very irritated, unhappy way. And it really bothered me. I lived there as my home, and all of a sudden these people right on the other side of the wall were driving me fucking nuts. And I sublet it for, I guess that was while I was on the Camino. I guess it was the 2 months I was in Spain. I sublet it to, I think, a Brazilian guy, I think he was. And I remember asking him how that was for him. And he said, oh, it's fine. I just put on my headphones while they were, And I was like, that didn't bother you? And he's like, no, it's just their style. And again, it's easier to, if it's not your life, just temporary, those kind of thoughts. Those are the thoughts I used to always apply. Well, if it's not my life, it's just temporary, then I can kind of put up with anything. But if I think it's my life and it's just going to be like this all the time, then it drives me nuts. And again, if you extrapolate that into a Buddhist teaching, you say, well, it's not my life, and it's just temporary, because everything is temporary and nothing is mine. Don't get attached and don't own anything. Voila, it's the exact same lesson. Apply that to everything and you're good. So it's really hard to do it if it's like your friends and it happens over and over and over. I get that. I've been thinking about talking about this for a few days, and the reason I've given it this prologue is I don't want to be judgy and hateful, right? And what I'm going to talk about is something that has definitely been triggering for me throughout my life, and I think is pretty judgy, and I think I was like, it was a hate I was holding, or have held. It's a hate I have held. And so when it's come up recently, fortunately, it's more on the side of compassion and pity isn't great. Pity isn't passion. Pity isn't kindness. Pity is still like you're dirty and ugly. I feel so sorry for you because that's sad. That's what pity is. I don't know. Pity can be nicer, but pity doesn't feel good in the same way that compassion does, where you're just like, I really care about you and I really love you and I'm sorry you're suffering in this way. That's more compassion, the way I come to understand it and feel good about holding it. In gay culture, we have, I'm sure this exists in straight culture too. In gay culture, we have the concept of the sugar daddy. And when you're youngin', 18, or maybe younger if you're lucky, or somewhat through your mid-20s, and hey, really can fit in any age. You can get offers from older men that are well established in life who just want to pay for you to be around them. And by pay for you means like buy you all the things you want. In this case, it would be phones and I don't know, technological garbage. That would be the trigger for me, I think. But you know, you don't have to pay rent, you don't have to buy your food. Maybe they'll give you a car. They generally buy lots of clothes and jewelry, if that's your thing. Doesn't work for me, so I've not had that. Travel. And these are the sugar daddies, right? The sugar daddies are people who generally need to pay to have people around because their personality hasn't been developed in a way of kindness and care and respect of another person. So they objectify and pay for the use of that other person and the presence of that other person. And certainly the men who offered to be my sugar daddy when I was younger were of that ilk, who, I'm not going to say they were cruel people, but they were so narcissistic, arrogant, and they just had a relationship understanding that was about usury, subject-object, objectification. So, again, so many relationships are like that it's not evil. I mean, even without calling somebody a sugar daddy, which is really where the story's going. I wouldn't say I ever had a sugar daddy. I've definitely had a lot of people who paid for dinner. I think I've even said that in one of my talks recently, who paid for dinner. And I do remember one time somebody offering to buy me a house. Somebody wrote a song about it. Somebody offered to buy me a house and gave me, I don't remember if it was £100 or £50. It might have just been £50. And said, I just want to make sure you have money. I don't want you to feel like you ever don't have your own money. So here's some money, just take it. And I was like, I'd never had that. But as you might have gleaned from that, it was in England. And the price I paid for that guy handing me money for no reason was a very high price. So in straight culture, a lot of these sugar daddy situations are just called husband and wife. It's just called marriage. That there are many relationships, of course, where people are partners and they make choices together and they support each other together in their way. And there are other relationships where, and that can manifest in, you can have one of them can have a job, one of them might not, both of them have jobs, whatever. It can manifest in all sorts of different ways. Partnership. But the relationship model that I'm talking about was the one that I was subjected to as a child and my parents, where one person was probably gaslit into believing she was stupid by her father and then her husband, and diminished and demeaned and, fed off of the psychology that had been set up for her by her father, like I'm saying, and her husband did this for her, my mother. And what do you call it? Provided for. That was the word I was looking for. And she was provided for. In the little bit of feminist theory I was exposed to, the great deal of misogyny I was exposed to, the abhorrence I had for the culture I grew up in, and the almost reactionary way I chose to be gay, so I wouldn't have to take part in heterosexual dynamics as I had witnessed, as they had been modeled to me, which, again, just what I remember from childhood was you have a woman around who does the things for you that you need her to do, and you constantly put her down and tell her she's stupid and make fun of her for all of her feelings. And I just didn't want to be a part of that. It was very painful to witness. And, me being a gay boy, the sympathy and empathy I had with my mother was painful to endure. She felt very trapped and she definitely didn't feel valued, right? I think that's a good way to say it. So I feel like, as you know, with the feminist theory and the misogyny and this whole cultural awareness, as I matured, what I saw in her, I also want to put this little piece of information in there. One of the things I learned walking across Spain with my mother was that we never fought. We never fought. And I feel like she pretty much unconditionally loves me. She's definitely had some problems with me, and she's had a lot of her love manifest as worry and fear, which doesn't feel good to me. But we didn't fight as when I was younger. We haven't fought through my life. We've never had that kind of relationship. I certainly remember experiences when I was a kid with her yelling at me and being angry with me. But certainly in my adult life, she has really been unconditionally loving in a way that I was going to say no other person in my life has, but Leo was for most of our relationship. So anyway, I really respect that, and I honor it, and I'm grateful for it. I have held judgment and hatred. And I use hatred here in the broad sense of anything that makes you want to push somebody away or destroy them. Because a lot of people think of hatred as being this special thing, and it's actually something we're doing constantly all the time to ourselves and other people that I define in that. It's something that makes you want to erase them, get rid of them, destroy them, get them away from you. So the versions of yourself, just to be an example, like if you're not good enough at something, then you're hating yourself. It's simple, simplifies it, you put it in that context. So I would be hateful towards my mother about this situation where I felt like she was in an abusive relationship. She was not being valued. And this is really the judgy part. I felt she was aware of this, that she was she had agreed to be in an abusive relationship where she was not being valued, wasn't in order to get in order to get a certain way of life, right? Now, her primary drive at this point was being a mother. So she couldn't be a mother without a home and food for her kids. So she allowed herself to be in an abusive relationship to support her kids, to allow her kids to grow, to have a good childhood. That is, there's area for pity there, there's area for compassion, there's area for respect, right? She did what she had to do to make sure her kids could grow. Light in my eyes now. And what I saw about that was that she was being a whore. And again, in feminist theory, I had read a lot of references to modern marriage just being legalized prostitution. You know, that you get to control this woman's life and use her as a sex object and make her do all of your cooking and cleaning and raise your children, and it's just for money. You don't have to love them, you don't have to respect them, you don't have to care about them, you just need to financially support them. And I really felt that was the relationship my parents had. And it made me angry and judgy. Sorry. And recently I've been feeling that again. I mean, it was probably something that was coming through the Mercury retrograde energy strands, but it's been very tricky to deal with and not be hateful about it, to not be, clingy and judgy and hateful about it. And yet still be aware of it, still keep my mind and heart open to that awareness and somehow try to communicate that to my mother without sounding hateful or judgy. That she is in a relationship that makes her unhappy to a degree that I would not ever tolerate, which is why I've been single most of my life. So that she can have a house with gardens and chickens and the food she likes. And one of the things that irritates me about the choices of the way she uses those resources is she squanders a lot of them. She gets a certain amount of money and spends it on things that she wastes. I guess that's the best way of putting it, that she wastes. She spends her small allowance on many things she wastes. Lots of food just rots and gets thrown out, squandered. So looking at it in the context of paying such a high price to receive something like the allowance she gets is not what she's worth, because she's constantly being devalued by her caretaker. Benefactor is not exactly the right word. Caretaker is not the right word. Or John. I don't know what the right word is. And it makes me so uncomfortable talk about this. But even this is still just a setup for the topic that I'm addressing. And the broad scope is relationship inequality, but she I wouldn't say she's being loved, but she's being loved a little. I mean, it's stupid to quantify love, but she's being loved a little, but she's being supported financially. Not as much as she could be to make her not stress out about it. She has lots of resentment about not getting enough. Get what she needs. She has lots of resentment about the way he spends money on his own, for his own things, the choices he makes with his money. Lots of resentment. And even with that, she still squanders what she gets. And I think it probably has to do with, because she's so used to being devalued and not being valued, not being seen, not being respected and heard, that she in turn does that as part of the relationship. And I'm sure there's just a whole bunch of, this is the who knows the chicken and the egg situation. I'm sure there are lots of her also not respecting, fulfilling his needs, etc. It takes two to tango. And this is the psychological setup I had when I was a teenager and coming of age, and the idea of love and looking for a partner. I didn't believe in love. I thought of love as a Hallmark sentiment and something to sell cards, something to justify this horrible misery of dissatisfying relationships. And was incredibly hard on myself in these situations where people were offering to be my sugar daddy. I would be hard on them too, and again, totally just resonating with the hatred and anger my mother has towards my father. And the resentment my father has towards her, and the hatred and anger he has towards her. There's so much resentment that would crop up very quickly in all of my relationships. Because I would just continually look at things to be like, oh man, any kind of pleasure or joy or nourishment or support is not worth this emotional feeling. Just because I saw my mother being with this guy, and again, this was when I was in my teenage years, and this is like, so now in this point in reality of time, this is over 20 years past that, and my parents are still in the same relationship. And so it could be said that it was really great really honorable while the kids lived at home, that my mother was making this sacrifice for her kids. But now she's making this sacrifice so that she can, be comfy in her house or whatever. It's not different. She knows it's the devil you knew over the devil you don't. The devil you know over the devil you don't, that thing. And I've been with a few men who I've tried to make a relationship with, who get on me about not pulling my weight or not paying enough or something. And I'm like, well, who's massaging you every day? Who's doing all the work in that respect? Who's doing, and then it becomes this resentment thing. Any of those dynamics, as soon as the resentment thing starts, and it tends to start really quickly, I'm just like, I'm out. Because again, if you can't choose gratitude over resentment, then you're just in this whirlpool of misery that I'm all too familiar with. Now, I'm going to put this in a context of one of the reasons I decided to do this tonight, talk about this, is I just had a conversation with my sister about her neighbors who were married for 10 years, a heterosexual couple, and I'll just try to make it quick. They were unhappy. They didn't have kids after 10 years. And the husband just fucked off. At the beginning of this year, he just fucked off. He got to the point where he had no interest in even telling his wife that he was, or having a conversation with her about it. He sent her a text message and said, I'm divorcing you, and I'm leaving by. I've gone. I think it was, I've gone. He took his stuff and left. And how heartbreaking that was to her. But my sister was saying that since he left her and she's had a total life collapse breakdown, she's understood how, she was calling him names and throwing things at him and hitting him, and she was constantly threatening to divorce him. So it was an emotional abuse situation. There's just so many of those, and how much of it is worth it? How long should you put up with emotional abuse? In talking about this story, I was telling my sister of how I had put together a list of resources to help specifically my father, if you want to be a better person. So it could be for anybody. I could share it with you guys. I'd be like, here's a list of resources if you want to be a better person. How do you be a better person? You care about being a better person. You understand the ways in which you are hurting yourself and hurting other people, and there's countless ways to work on it nowadays. You find a way to be responsible for the damage you do, and try to bring some kind of amelioration, or just some kind of awareness to make yourself less of an asshole. I don't know, I guess it's tricky to make yourself, to talk about being a better person, because you have to accept yourself where you're at. You have to love yourself no matter how you are. But again, my whole value system, I feel, has changed in recent years to include things like I'm being harmless. Like, I really value being harmless. I don't even feel like this talk is harmless, because I'm just like, oh my God, if my parents saw this, they would feel terrible. So that's not harmless. But in telling these stories, I don't know, it's about referencing some of my psychological architecture that many other people share that they're grappling with. Anyway, I put together this list of ways to make yourself a better person, and if you care about having people in your life and you have to try to not hurt them all the time, then here are some things that could be useful. One of the things in that list was a website article called How to Stop Being a Bully. And it was definitely aimed at kids, but it was very well written, I thought. And I was just like, oh, this is exactly how my dad is, so this would be really useful for him. And I was reading it again, and then I was reading it again last night, and when my sister was talking about this relationship these people had, it really reminded me of that she was bullying her husband to the point where he was like, there's no point in having a respectful heart-to-heart, face-to-face discussion with you, because you've shown me, however long it was, for 5 years or 10 years or 2 years, however long the abuse was going on, that you don't respect me and that you will abuse me. So I'm just done. I think of that in the context of, I was also saying this to somebody recently. Maybe I'll go to that. Yeah, no, I'll just say this first, and then I'll go to that. That Facebook has been really useful for me in the last, 5 years. Facebook has changed so much over the years as we've used it, right? Like at one point it was stupid, and then it became essential, and then it became like a fun party. I used to describe it as the agora. It's the internet agora. It's where everybody comes to hang out in public of the internet. For a while, that's what it felt like to me, and it was like a little party, and then it became this horrible nightmare mind control technique device thing when Cambridge Analytica and all that. And I just have distrusted it for years now. And it's felt real. I've been really cautious about every time I look at it. And when I did this heartbreak story, meaning that I fell in love with someone and then broke my heart and cried for months, because 2 of my friends had also died that year and everything had changed. It was an important growth process for me, but it involved a relationship heartbreak awareness thing. Which I'll just describe quickly because it's very useful, that I had realized in the meditation retreats that I had built my life around you. No, that I had built my life, the idea of what my life was supposed to be, on the necessity of having a relationship. And that there was this person who I was going to find, and we were going to be able to do these things together. And once we were together and we were doing these things together, then I could do this and do this and do this, and my life would really be happening and I would be happy. And because I had made it to the age of 38 and that hadn't happened, and I had been constantly miserable and scared and afraid of rejection, afraid of never finding this person, afraid of losing this person, blah, 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 and never actually having this person, and every time I had sex with anybody, I would be like, maybe he's the one, and I would imagine a whole future together and believe in it and have a heartbreak, and then it would just fade away. But so I had this heartbreak that was a relationship of 8 months, which was something. I don't know, I was going to say long, not long, whatever. But one of the things Facebook became for me after that, and it's still this way, that it's like almost any time I look at Facebook or Instagram, I'm seeing somebody post about how much they love their partner and how he is the best thing that's ever happened to their lives, and he's the most loving, wonderful person they've ever met, and that their life was changed 33 years ago when I met this wonderful man, and all these things. Just as likely as I am to sign onto Facebook and say, like, my partner of 25 years left me for gym rat, or an 18-year-old, or died in a car crash today, or has been, sick for 6 months of cancer and just passed away, and I'm back at his grave today, and here's this, or committed suicide. Oh my, this, oh man, so heartbreaking. I read this story of some guy who I just thought was cute. He was one of those beard whatever. He was a hot guy, and I had been friends with him for a few years and hardly knew him, and I read through his thing, and he had committed suicide shortly after he got married to some guy, and his husband was posting about, I don't know what I did wrong, and I was like, oh honey, it has nothing to do with you. Somebody killing himself because he thought that when he got that husband that everything would work and then he'd be happy, and he found out that it wasn't true, and he couldn't handle that. When I found out that that's what I had done psychologically, that I had built this whole thing, that I could never actually be happy, and my life wasn't actually started until I had a husband, which here I was at 38, and it just wasn't starting. I had to cry in a meditation retreat many, many, many days about letting that die, letting that imaginary Prince Charming, someday my prince will come, letting that die. And it's, to a certain degree, that's where the resentment of the sugar daddy relationships come from. Is like, what I signed up for was a fairy tale romance. What I'm getting is being treated like a cheap whore, stable girl, whatever, and how much am I going to agree to the way you want to treat me whenever you want to pay attention to me and use me. It's so nice to see people interact who have been together a long time and just how much they love their wives or love their husbands. It is so nice to see that. But also so painful to see people who are together who hate each other. Anyway, so I was describing this Facebook, Instagram effect of constantly being reminded that being in a relationship does not secure happiness in any way. It does not, even if you're with somebody for 25 years, you still might suffer the worst experience of your life in watching him die. And then, if you haven't learned your lesson, you're going to be alone and lonely and hopeless for however much longer you're alive. Although I've certainly met people that when their husband or partner dies and they're very sad, they go through mourning and they still love them and miss them, but they're also like, okay, it's time to get on with my life now. I've been putting up with that guy for so long. Even if they love them, even if they think they had a good relationship as opposed to thinking they had a bad relationship. I still think it's good to be in a relationship. And a lot of people ask me if I'm single, or are you in a relationship? It's that question, not like if you're single. I'm okay with being like, yeah, I'm single. But if people say, are you in a relationship? I don't like getting involved with guys who are in a relationship. I'm like, I'm in a lot of relationships. There are a lot of people that I love and have very deep, loving relationships with. Some of them I have sex with, some of them I don't. But I do not have a partner. This is the way I like to answer that. I don't think I've ever had a partner, but I've had best friends, and I've had a lot of people who love me dearly, and that's wonderful. It is. I mean, I don't, at one point I felt, and this was maybe 10 years ago, I felt like I can't really have friends unless they're madly in love with me. Maybe it was something somebody else said that I then applied to my own psychology, and I was like, I think that's true about me too. But yeah, I was talking with somebody who is a few years younger than me, but he also grew up in Indiana. And I knew him from New York, and he was saying, that he's like almost 40 and he's not had the boyfriend. Still single. And part of maturity is kind of coming to terms with like, well, that's okay, it's what's happening, so. But I wonder if I ever will. There's still this regret, longing. it sure would be nice, right? But when I think about the people that I've tried to have relationships with, and that it's worked really badly, I am so not willing to give them second chances a lot of the time. And I think that when I was younger, I would give people second chances, and it always turned out badly, because I was like, oh, this is exactly the same thing as it was before. It doesn't matter how much I think I've changed or they think they've changed. I'm like, oh, this is it. But now I've changed differently, so maybe, but again, it's a relationship is two people, so you can't. One of the things that really helped me make peace, I have a relationship. I still have this relationship. Somebody I love very much, one of my best friends who, for years I was just like, I just wish it was different. If we fit together, we're so. He could be a partner to me, and I could just live with him forever. If I could just figure out how to be okay with the way he is and the way I wish he weren't, and I'd just be okay with him being not what I wish he was, and I had all this agonizing and longing, but agonizing over trying to fit him into a shape that he wasn't. And he wanted me to do that. I mean, I really felt like what he wanted was he would just be like, I'm fine with the relationship as it is. You just have to accept it and it'll be fine. And he wasn't, but I think that's the personality he was portraying. And so in all this meditation retreats, I remember coming to him once and being like, I've realized that our relationship is never going to be anything else than what it is. And I'm okay with that now. I'm letting it die, the idea that it's going to be or could possibly be something that it isn't and won't ever be. And he was like, what? And I could tell he was really hurt that I had given up on, we're never going to be partners. I'm just going to love you and you're my friend. And this is all a relationship's ever going to be. And I'm okay with that now. But I mean, it had been like over a decade of agonizing in different ways. And with people that I've known also since that kind of revelation in my psychology that I've loved and who love me, it is so nice to feel their love and respect in whichever level they're able to do it, in a sex object or thinking I'm a wonderful, magical person, as one of them said, and trying to get me to be their boyfriend again. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that again. And as somebody I was talking with a couple days ago said, what is that old phrase, fool you once, shame on me? And I was like, no, it's fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. That it's really just like, it's that many times that like if somebody shows you who they are and you feel what the actual relationship is and you're like, this is all it's ever going to be. So if you get into it again thinking it's going to be something else that it isn't, shame on you. Go ahead and be miserable. Tricky thing is that there's infinite opportunities for misery, right? Gotta be careful. So yeah, I don't know, relationships are still fascinating to me. I'm a Gemini, we're still in the time of Gemini. No, we passed into Cancer. Oh, we're in the time of Cancer. I'm just your mother, I love you. I just love you, I love you. Oh, it's okay, honey, however you are. That's much better. Although brothers, Gemini, they're not asking you to be anything. You're not. They don't even know who the fuck you are. They just think you're you, or you're me. Geminis, we're just like, hey, you're just another person for me to talk to. You can listen to me. You're my audience member. This is great. Let's go play a game. Libras are more like, hey, can we be partners? That's what they say. Who knows? I don't know. Gemini time, Cancer time. That was distracting. But it's fascinating to me to see this. I mean, as we're coming out of this Mercury retrograde, and to see this way that I feel of, I don't know, compassion, pity, sadness, anger, of this whole relationship dynamic that I witnessed as a teenager, and still feeling like my mom is trapped in a sugar daddy situation, that diminishes him as much as it diminishes her, and keeps them both trapped in a dissatisfaction, unhappiness, and who knows if they'd ever be able to be out of it, you know? You can't... Their dog, more my dad's dog, but it's their dog, our dog, my dog. He whimpers. He has practiced being a miserable, pathetic dog. He's so good at the pitiful dog routine. He knows how to howl and whimper and make these, just agonizing sounds. Funnily enough, her cat knows how to do that too, but in a different cat way and for very different ways. But most of the time, he's out in a kennel by himself. It looks like a cell block. It's cement with cage. He can go inside and outside, but he's, in a small cement cage space. I don't know if it's inhumane. It's dog. It's certainly a lot better than what a lot of dogs have. He has clean water and food. And I think in recent years, they allow him to come in a lot. But my mother hates having him inside. And and my dad beats him sometimes. It's all like, it's horrible. But again, he's not starving by the side of the road. He's not riddled with parasites. He lives a pretty good life. But when he whimpers at me and tries to make me feel pity for him, to go let him out, I've been telling him to watch his breath, stay in the present, relinquish desire. And when he gets reborn, he might be in a better situation than this. You don't want to be in a worse one, buddy. Relationships. For so many years, what I was asking for was somebody to transform reality with. We could make love, we could have sex, and literally, like, our orgasms would tap into the net of reality and change the shape of it to our will and love. Maybe our own reality. I had this mechanistic understanding that by us having sex and manifesting our love through orgasmic bliss, radiating it out, then we would draw into our lives all of the beauty and wonder that we could imagine together. Heal all of our sicknesses, because that's, of course, an issue. I've always been a Virgo rising. Heal all of the sicknesses, psychological, emotional, physical. We can do it. We'll heal each other. We'll be rich and famous and creative and have a wonderful life. And I haven't met anybody who actually wants to play that game. I've met people who say they want to play that game, but they don't want to play that game. If lust and hate is the candy, then we give them what they want. The song came up in my head today. I don't remember all the words. I just want you all to be happy. I remember my mother saying that with tears in her voice so often. I just want everybody to be happy. Why can't everybody be happy? I just want everybody to be happy. Why can't everybody be happy? Because we're attached to the ideas, the fixed views of what we think will make us happy. That doesn't make us happy. We keep chasing after them and they disappoint us and make us sad. And we get even more sad because this is supposed to make us happy. I know that I like this. Why won't it make me happy? And I don't like this, so I'm going to get away from it. I'm going to crush it and erase it and destroy it, and then I'll be happy because I won't have these things making me unhappy. Why isn't this making me happy? I'm going to just fucking tune out and play video games and watch TV forever. Why isn't that making me happy? Why can't I even tune out? I'm sorry that this is the story and the way it works, but I got a sweet tooth for licorice drops and jelly rolls. Sugar daddy, handsome, needs some sugar in his bowl. I don't know how this is useful at all. I don't like it. But I hope we can be free of this resentment and imbalance, devalues. I hope that we can find love and respect and peace and joy together as friends and family and lovers and partners. I wish that for you and you and you and me too. The sunset. Where are the fireflies behind my head? I don't know. Do you hear the little insects? Love you. Good night.